The first question is probably the most important question I'm going to ask you on this interview.
Go for it.
Whose house?
Uh, it's Mark's house.
There we go.
It's
Yes.
definitely Mark's house.
I had to. Man, you've
People always get that twisted.
no. Like, oh,
The
they think
people
it's
who hit
their
it higher than
house.
me.
They
Their
they
house,
think
Swerve's house, all of it. I mean, right now in the hierarchy of things, it's definitely Swerve's house. But
right. It's well, first it was Run's house, and then it was
yep.
your house. Well, then it was
Then
Paige's.
Paige,
Then it was
then
your
Paige
house.
used it for a little
Paige's,
while, and then
so
Swerve, and currently
yeah.
it's Swerve's because he's the man of the hour, and I'm just the old man that's on his way down. So
Yeah, but you spell house so much better though.
yeah, it's
It's
very, very German, very, very.
it is.
Oh, yes, yes, very German.
So I know over 20 years exactly. How long for
Started in
sure?
'03.
Okay,
So I
so
did backyard
21.
wrestling since like 2000, but I started in a ring in 2003.
Okay. So what, 21 years now?
Yeah, yeah.
What was back then? Because for one, you don't really get a chance to sit down and pick the brain of talk to somebody who's been in the business for that long. What was your training like back then compared to what you've seen training be like now?
Uh, it was a little more brutal back then. I mean, it's still all kind of the same. When I started, where I started, it was a guy that had no right training people, and he just wanted some money, and it
You're
was
like
very carny.
that's a common that's a common thing, it seems like, with so many long-term veteran wrestlers. It's like my first trainer was awful. Like just
Yeah. I mean, I there was a guy, and no one in this that's listening to this would ever know who he is. His name was Tiger Smith. He just he thought he knew wrestling and he wanted to teach people, and so he just wanted money from people, and he would show stuff. And I realized a couple of years in that everything he taught was absolutely incorrect. So I had to go back and reteach myself. But training schools, it's like it is then as it is now. The only difference is that now I'm not going to say it's softer, but now it's a little bit more forgiving in terms of people having to be in shape and people having to watch the product and things like that. Back in the day, like, it was your responsibility to be in shape. And uh if you weren't in the shape that you needed to be, you would hear about it. And if you weren't doing the things you didn't need to do, like watching tape and being able to know the product and being able to travel around, it it was just a lot more, in my opinion, demanding at times as compared to a lot of places now. I mean, if you go to the really reputable schools now, they expect that of you. But, there really is no regulation. Any person can start up a training school and say that they're a wrestling school nowadays.
how long did it take for you into your career to where you quote unquote got it, things clicked, and things really came together? And do you think anybody really gets to the point where like they fully get it?
If anybody feels that they fully get it, they're lying to you. It's one of those things where it's just like technology and everything in business or everything in life. Everything constantly evolves. So there's always a point of getting it. You can get it to a certain point, but there's always going to be more to evolve. Like even now, I come in and I haven't worked you know, this style out in the Midwest, but watching how everybody works out here is different than the East Coast. And so I've learned a thing or two, and being able to go through some of the training and figure out some of the stuff and how people talk and communicate. It's different. It doesn't mean that it's wrong or right. It just means it's different. So I'm constantly learning even after all these years. As far as how long it took me to get it, I mean, I'm still getting it. But I mean, it really probably took me 4 or 5 years of really traveling. I mean, for me, what it was is that I would say closer to the 9, 10 year mark where I really, really got it. Because what ended up happening is I was traveling around wrestling shows, doing the normal weekend warrior stuff. And then there was a
Mhm.
point where there was a school that I was at called Pier 6 Wrestling, and they were going to shut down because the trainers had to go. There was just reasons behind it. They were parting ways. They didn't have anybody. And
Sure.
uh, swearing, is it going to bother you?
Nope, say whatever
Okay.
the fuck you
So
want. I don't care.
perfect. So I bullshitted my way and I was like, yeah, sure, I can be a trainer. And I had no idea. And at that point, that's when I Started going on the road every weekend, regardless of bookings or not. I went to every seminar within hundreds of miles, spent every last penny I could to be able to go to seminars, read books, watch tape, everything I could to take it seriously. And that's when I started to get it, because I dove into it so deep that that's all I did. It was work, wrestling. And I took it super serious, like a job.
What was the hardest thing for you to grasp as far as just the in-ring training? Was there any one thing that just it took longer than others to really get down or grasp or just do?
Psychology and promos. Anybody can follow the rules in terms of, it's really easy for you to follow steps like a dance when you have to
Mhm.
go, okay, this is how a body slam works. This is how a hip toss works. This is what
Right.
punches look like. That stuff's easy. That's the part that everybody tries to perfect and tries to be the best at. But the thing is that you have all these parts, but if you don't know how to get people to feel something, it's like if you watch wrestling, turn the TV on mute and try to watch it on mute. It's not as entertaining as when you can hear the crowd, when you can hear the announcers, when you can hear the
Yep.
wrestlers. So it's like nowadays you see people all the time. Like the one thing I've noticed out here, at least from what I've seen in Indianapolis, is a lot of people focus on the moves, and it's hard to watch people focus on the sell and focus on promos and focus on psychology. Where like if you've watched my stuff, and I mean we've talked a bunch, I don't do anything. I don't do anything. I've perfected how to do moves and I know how to sell, but it's like I can go out there and just be and do absolutely nothing and still get the same reaction as the guys who are killing themselves for 10, 12, 14 minutes with move after move after move, and I'm doing punches and kicks.
Yeah, I talked to TJ Powers about that last week in an interview where I told him, it's like, I've seen you go out, and this could probably apply to you too. I've seen you go out on a show, same show as a guy doing five suicide dives and a 450 and a shooting star press. And they get reactions, obviously, when they come out because the crowd likes them, get a reaction. But then it seems like halfway through the match, the crowd dies off. They're not as invested. And by the end of the match, there's no reaction until, the one, two, three or the final bell compared to when you work a match or, another veteran would work a match, don't do hardly anything, but the crowd is just hook, line, and sinker the whole time invested in it.
Well, the biggest thing is I try to tell people coming in and people who try to ask their advice is put it this way. You can ask everybody at home who's watching this that put this in perspective for you is that I'll ask you, what's your favorite feud of all time in wrestling?
Me personally?
Mhm.
Oh
Or one
man.
of them. You don't got to give
One
a
of
name.
the oh man. Brett and Sean is one. I loved that.
Perfect. We're
CM
going to
Punk,
go with,
John Cena, CM Punk is another one.
we'll go with those two. So out of those two, they're blow off matches. So each of their blow off matches, could you tell me from bell ringing to bell ringing every single spot in order of what happened?
No, but I can tell you what the premise of the story was and how the ending happened.
And that is the important part. The thing is that people don't realize, and I might get some flack for it from the fans, but if the fans really sit down and think about it, we don't watch wrestling for wrestling. We watch wrestling for the story and how it makes us feel. If we wanted to watch wrestling for wrestling, again, put your TV on mute and just watch the TV. It's going to bore you to death. Or
Mhm.
put both dudes in black trunks, a black mask, and put it on mute, and then try to have fun enjoying it.
Yeah. Yeah, you hear it all the time. The one of the most common comparisons for that is Hulk Hogan and The Rock at WrestleMania 18. Watch the match with the sound off, and it's okay, but watch it with the sound on.
Amazing.
Yeah,
And that's the
completely.
thing is that moves are just a facilitation to be able to get an emotion. And if you're just doing moves together with no rhyme or reason as to why it's happening to get a reaction, that's why people die out, because eventually, you know, it's like someone watching NASCAR that does not watch NASCAR. They're like, why are we watching 500 left-hand turns? But when you get into it as a NASCAR fan and you understand the psychology and the story behind why this person and why they're doing what they're doing and understanding the why, that's when NASCAR fans are super into it. But as an average person like me, if I just watch them go around in a circle and not understand anything and not get the emotion, the psychology, nothing behind it, it's just cars.
Mhm.
It's the same thing, and that's what it is in wrestling. It's just moves to the average person, but that's why new fans get hooked because they see something that elicits an emotion that gets them to want to be invested.
over the last 20, 21 years, how have you seen wrestling evolve on the level that you're on the indie level, the local level? How have you seen it change and evolve for the better, and maybe in ways that you wish it hadn't changed?
For the better, and it's one of those things where I would look at it from like two perspectives because there's the baseline beginning portion of it where the people are just getting in, and then there's the super indies because I've seen the full gambit of it all the way up. So it's in the super indies. What's gotten better is that people have gotten in incredible shape. Their wrestling ability has gotten way better. Um, and but on the flip side of it, I would say that people's I don't know. I'm more old school, but I think the psychology behind it is I understand that we all know that it's scripted and whatnot, but at the end of the day, I personally, and maybe this is just me, I went back and watched some of the Attitude Era, and some of that wrestling is not great. But
Yeah.
what I liked about it is it didn't feel rehearsed. Everything now is
Mhm.
so clean that when anybody diverts off of something that's perfect, the whole crowd goes, "You fucked up." No, they didn't fuck
Yeah.
up. In a fight, fights aren't perfect,
Yeah.
and fights don't look gracious, and they make it look so fake now and so scripted that it doesn't have that sense of realism, which is why you see guys go out and walk and talk. Like got guys like Taker that can go out there and he wrestled up to a couple years ago and he looked legit half the time and it didn't look super scripted.
Hmm.
Whereas back in like the Attitude Era, yeah, the matches were not the prettiest on the eyes, but guys bumped stuff, they figured it out and they went with it. And now
Yeah.
it's so clean that it becomes almost unbelievable. For instance, there was a student, and I'm going to give him a shout out because he's worked really hard. His name is Mike Noble out of the WCWO school.
Oh yeah.
He
Yeah.
he's going to be fantastic. He's one of the few that hits me up all the time. I went over his house and I started watching tape, and the first thing he goes, "I want to watch NXT," and I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, I want to watch NXT." I was like, everybody watches that. That's the product now. Why don't you watch something that nobody else watches so you can get a different perspective?
Mhm.
And I keep forgetting, like he's like, "Oh yeah, I started watching wrestling like 2007," and I was like,
Oh.
"Oh my god!" And I'm sitting here thinking like, "Oh, you ever watch Attitude Era?" He's like, "What's the Attitude Era?" And I was like, "Not what's the Attitude Era, but like he hasn't watched that stuff because that wasn't
Right.
what he grew up on." So to me, it
Right.
blows my mind. I was like,
Oh my
how,
God.
I was like, I started showing him. I was like, "Watch the Monday Night Wars." He goes, "What's the Monday Night Wars?" And I went, "Oh, brother." So I was like, "You need to start going
We've
back to these
hit
guys.
that age, Mark. We've hit
We're
that
old.
age.
We hit
Oh
that
my God.
age." Oh my god,
The attitude era for us right now was Flair and Dusty for
yep,
our
yeah.
parents when we were
What
kids.
kills me with the whole thing is I started explaining to him he was kind of familiar that Malone and Rodman wrestled in a tag match in WCW. He had no idea. He's like, really? So I showed him the documentary. He watched it. And he was like, so like I've introduced him. I said, you need to go back and watch stuff that's not NXT. So what did we do? I put on Clash of Champions 1. And he goes, oh God, this is going to be really boring 80s stuff. And I went, I hate you. And it was funny because you can put on NXT now and you can put on a 6 to 8 minute match. And how many times do you think modern wrestling fans pick up their phone to look at their phone during it?
Whole
10,
time.
12, 15 times
Whole
because they're
time.
so bored because it's
Yep.
so scripted and it's the same thing over and over again. There's no
Yeah.
flavor. But I showed him Clash of Champions 1. Even the first match, it was oh god, Jimmy Garvin versus IRS, but back when he was doing his the collegiate gimmick,
The
and he was
varsity
like,
club.
yes, and he was like, he wrestled here, and he was hooked, and we got watching, and it was Flair Sting for 45 minutes in the main event. He didn't pick up his phone once.
That's
I go, hey,
awesome.
buddy, how many times did you pick up your phone? He goes, oh, I didn't even, and he had a million text messages. And no, he didn't even pay attention to it. He just kept watching the match. He was so invested. But then we turn on NXT, he couldn't get through a 6 minute match without checking his phone a million times. And that is the point that people aren't figuring out is that we're not figuring out how to keep people anymore
Yeah.
because we're not giving them the emotion, the storyline, the personalities. We're giving gimmicks, ha ha, funny all the time. That's why like the Roman thing works. That's why the whole Cody thing works because it was real emotions that he came back to. That's
Hmm.
why those handful of people, their stories work.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
Sammy got to
And
where he was now because it was an honest thing in the background. They just
mhm.
amped it up.
Which is why, and you bring up a good point. You watch matches with guys like Private Party or, those guys. And yeah, it's fun to watch because it's flips and they're like acrobats, but like that whole AEW show is that exact same thing all the way through until guys like The Miz or MJF will come out and completely different style, a little bit more old school wrestling style. Hooked because
Like
it's
even stuff like
different.
this week, you had Joe and Hook, and they did a really good job, just like Taker did with Jeff Hardy. They gave him the rub, but Joe also has been around. He understands
Mhm.
everything, and he's trying to work his style in with AEW. But that's the thing, like AEW is great, but they focus more on moves, which is fantastic. And then you got WWE who focuses less on moves, more on story. But the thing is that they're two polar opposites, and there's nothing kind of in the middle. I mean, there's other places. Ring of Honor is purely wrestling. TNA
Yeah.
is kind of figuring themselves out again. A lot of the indies are just there's no real storylines. But again, my kind of thought process, and I know I might be uh, the small few, but like storylines don't work on the indies unless you were a super indie. But it's like you see all these local indies um, they don't work with storylines because people just want to see wrestling because they don't go to enough shows to follow it. And for the
Mhm.
5 or 6 people that actually go for the storylines, they'll be fine without it. So I feel
Yeah.
like that indies need to do a better job of just having the best quality matches they can and having maybe potentially one storyline that runs maybe a month. Other than that, it should just be best man up matches.
Right. How'd you get connected with WCWO, Joey Owens, and that whole that promotion and that locker room and all of that?
On a whim, and I relocated out here temporarily in August, and I work remotely, so I was able to relocate out here. And I had just gotten my surgery for my torn tricep and my broken elbow, and it was funny because I remember the first day I looked online and this was the only local company that said it was around. And so I drove down on a Friday night and I literally walked into the back locker rooms meeting and I said, "Hey, I'm Mark from New York. I'm a wrestler." And they all looked at me like, "Who the hell are you? You need to get out of here." And I went and bought a ticket and I sat down and watched the show. And afterwards I talked to Joey and I told Joey, I was like, "Hey, I'd like to come down to your training school. I'd like to run your school while I'm here. I'm pretty sure you'll like what you see." And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, sure, whatever." And I showed up the next day and I got in for 5, 10 minutes. He listened to what I had to say, watched what I had to do. And he goes, "All right, you can train whatever you want. Come on down. You can help out." And that was the end of it.
I
But that's
remember the
really what it was. It
first.
was literally me walking in on the locker room and people going, "Who the hell is this dude?"
I remember I don't know if I was there that night, but I was in the production room with Joey, and you walked in like, "You mind if I take notes and stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, take notes." Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And
And then
so,
it turned in from me being just some dude to now to the point where I think a lot of people confide in terms of
mhm.
opinions and observations because I try to do what I can to help everybody. It's not about an ego thing for me. I really just want to help wrestling grow. And I hope that I give a pretty decent perspective from a different areas for you guys.
Yeah, and you have worked with God so many places, with so many people, whether it be Ring of Honor, working with guys like MJF well before he was known, but still Maxwell Jacob Feinstein at the time, I believe.
Yep.
Um, Dalton Castle, Brody Lee, so many people. What have you been able to take away from working with all of these people at all of these places that's helped you?
The number one thing I will tell you from these guys, and something that a lot of indie workers lack, is work ethic. I mean, a lot of guys come in and they don't look the best and they don't present themselves the best, and their package is like they want to come across like I don't know in this area. I know Kroger's probably like the most fancy. What's the most fancy grocery store here?
Fancy would probably be Meyer. I get
Okay,
Trader Joe's is a really interesting
now
one.
Trader Joe's. Yeah, well, kind of look at it like this: everybody wants to be a filet mignon, but most
Mm.
indie workers now are presenting themselves as a dollar menu hamburger. So they come in and they go, "I'm going to give you dollar menu hamburger level of quality, but I want you to look at me like I'm a filet mignon." And that's kind of how people come across, where it's like, I've done this long enough. I have nothing to prove. I don't know if I'm going to come back because with my injuries and whatnot and my circumstances over the next couple of years, I'm still going to be around to help, give people advice and whatnot. But you see me, I come down to the training school. I'm doing all the workouts with one arm. I'm trying to run spots with people. I'm still watching tape. I'm still critiquing stuff. I'm still working on promos. I'm still working on my future just in case, but I'm still consistently working. And that's one of those things you always learn from a lot of those names, is that these guys were eat, sleep, and breathe. You would either be at the gym watching your calories. I mean, even now, I go out on Fridays after the WCWO shows to go have a bite to eat to build camaraderie. Other than that, I'm at home meal prepping constantly. And I'm not going out and drinking my face off at the bars. I'm not eating the crappy food. Even when I'm limited from getting back from injury, I'm meal prepping, drinking my water, doing
Hmm.
workouts that I can, watching tape, working on future stuff where a lot of these guys won't. They'll, find an excuse of why they can't come down to training, or because they're not a student anymore, there's no need for them to go to training. I've
Hmm.
been around a long time and you still see me in there working with guys because I want to learn stuff and I want to get better and I need my reps. You're never going to stop learning and getting better.
Hmm.
And I feel
Right.
like at a certain point there's a lack of drive and commitment and urge with a lot of indie workers nowadays.
Working in promotions like maybe a Ring of Honor who do a legitimate production, what are some things that you took away from working shows like that that's helped you even on non-televised and non-recorded shows?
What's helped me on it? I mean, to be honest with you, asking questions. I mean, I was one of those guys that anytime a name came into a company, I would call the promoter and offer to pick them up from the hotel, offer to
Hmm.
pick them up from the airport. I would offer all the time, and I would ask them questions. And what I would do is before I got in the car with these people, I would figure out what questions I wanted to ask them specifically to them, and I would take note of it, or I'd ask them if I can record it, or I would sit down and get all their numbers. And I got numbers to most of them now, where we'll hit them up every once in a while. Hey, can I throw this by you or do this? It's building a network and having the courage to be able to do that. A lot of guys, they'll see a name and they just go over and they get starstruck and they shake their hand. I always ask them questions. I would walk over to the names like, can you watch my match? 99% of the time, these guys will watch your match. All you got to do is ask them. And with production, like, I'd go to Ring of Honor and I did a bunch of security and helped out and did a couple matches and whatnot. And I would sit in the back when everybody else would just go out and just mark out and be like, "Oh, I'm at Ring of Honor." I would sit
Hmm.
in Gorilla in production. I would sit back and I'd watch and I would ask, "Hey," I would ask Delirious at the time when he was doing it. I was like, "Can I help you? Can I help you? Is there anything you do?" No, 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 go away. Okay, that's fine. But I would sit back until they told me that if I needed to leave, and I would sit there and I'd watch production. I would watch everything they did, from time cues to cameras to everything. And I think like that's just as important as wrestling, is like the things that indie workers don't. Indie workers are just people. I mean, there's lots of indie workers that do it correct. So I'm not generalizing everybody, but I'm saying there's a lot of people that, they don't realize that the referee is as important as what they are. That's one of those things here. I don't know if you heard me say it a million times at WCWO. I'm really trying to, legitimize the referees again, because people are, if it's not just two dudes rolling around in the ring, that's, you need
Hmm.
the referee to be able to tell the story. So
Yep.
people need to pay more attention to the referees. You need to pay attention to production, because like from that, I learned that anything over a minute for a promo is a waste of time, especially
Hmm.
for major companies. How to be able to promote yourself, how to be able to, like, little things, 2 or 3 seconds, hold your pose after your promo so they can cut it off. Most guys walk out, don't move when you're
Yep.
cutting your promo, try to stay still, make your points, talk more articulately. That's just promos. Then for your entrance, make sure your entrance music, you see it a lot at WCWO, 30, 40, 50-second intros. No one cares. My
Yeah.
intro is 3 seconds.
Hmm.
Boom. I stick to my time constraints. Lots of things. Like, these are the things you learn when you watch production TV, because it's not about the wrestling. It's about how you can get through timestamp through an hour of storytelling effectively to give the most, to maximize the most people, to get the most time in a time frame that's there. So everybody has to go to their time so we can all be respectful of each other. Whereas you go to indie shows and guys are like, I'm the fucking man. I'm going to go 5 minutes over. And it's like, all you're doing is hurting the next person, which is
Yep.
hurting the show. And no one
Hmm.
really cares at the end of the day.
Yeah. And honestly, sometimes hurting your match because matches don't always have to go even the planned amount of time. Um,
You
you
got to
know,
read that
if
crowd.
yeah, you could hit a spot where your finish could hit at that time that you've got the crowd right where they need to be, and the match could end. Or,
Yeah.
it's like
Oh, I've had
I hear that
matches
all
that
the
I
time.
cut them 10 minutes short just because I'm like, that's where the crowd was. And they come back and the promoter's like, "What'd you do?" And I said, "I cut it short because of this reason. Give it to somebody else." And, they split it out 2 minutes apiece to somebody else, and they're super happy about it. And I got the same story across in 10 minutes than I did in 20. I saved myself some bumps and I saved the company some time.
Mhm. What was the team, and I don't know how short-lived it was, but What was the team of Maxwell House like for you?
It was fun. It was a handful of matches. We it literally was one of those things where we got thrown together uh, as a joke. We went to one of the shows and it was like they're like, we want you to work with Max, and I was like, sure, sure. And it was a couple matches against like Bull James, Mike Verna in this
Mm.
EWF in this company in New York City. It's no longer around, but Max was newer at the time, but he was starting to really make waves for himself. And I came in and we just kind of had very similar thought process. It was a lot of we don't want to do much because we're heels, but we want to be able to get over. So we just put the whole thing together. And like his name was Maxwell, my last name was House. Like, sweet, we're the cup of
Yeah.
coffee you need.
Yes.
We're the shot of caffeine that you need. And so we did is that they booked us right after intermission, and we came out and talked all this shit about how we're so good and we're this and that. And then we ended up coming out and just wrestling really basic, boring matches of rest holds and selling and whatnot. And we had a hipster manager that came out with one of those coffee koozies, and we drink our coffee. And one of them was like a cutoff spot was coffee got thrown in the face and it burned the face. And it was just silliness, but it was nice to be able to do something with him. And it's been nice to watch him grow because he has gone from just, I can't even say gone from just being a new kid. Like he always had that presence. You always knew he was going to be something fantastic, and he just to the moon. But yeah, he was a really good dude.
What can you tell me about Brody Lee and any interactions you had with him, the relationship you had with him?
So the relationship is that in Rochester there was his backyard wrestling company. It was him and a bunch of his friends, and then there was a rival one, which was us, and we decided to be. And we didn't even know we were rivals at the time. And it was never a rivalry thing. It was just
Right.
me and my friends started doing it, and then I realized them and their friends started doing it. We were the FYWF, the Front Yard Wrestling Federation, just to be cool. But like Brody started in, and I don't know if you've seen the WWE documentary where it has Samurai Martial Arts Dojo.
I don't
You'll have
know
to
if
go
I've
back and
seen that
watch.
one. I don't know
You'll
if
have to
I've seen that one.
watch it. It's like a 15-minute thing, and it gives like a quick rundown of Brody's career in WWE. But there was Samurai Martial Arts Dojo with this guy named Kurt Sawyer, and it had like enough seats for like 75 people. And I remember is that I did my backyard wrestling with my friends in the summer of '03 before I got in, when I graduated high school. That Tiger Smith guy was just looking for some quick cash, and they offered $20 a piece for all of us backyard guys to come in and have a show in a ring. They taught us for 20 minutes in a low boy boxing ring, and then we wrestled on it. And afterwards, I was shown interest that like, oh, you could actually do this, and I was like, oh, this is a possibility for me. And I remember is that Brody, through people, Brody was one of them that kind of like threw it out there, like, hey, there's going to be a tryout at RCW, which is the place that at Samurai Martial Arts. And I got in, and the rest is history. But like Brody and I were never like the closest of friends. We were from the area. We knew each other. He was always a good person. We were friends to a point. Um, but like he made a WWE and went off and did his thing. And there's a huge crew there that's very close to each other. But Brody was nothing but respectful for me. When it came down to it, um, he was just, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Like there's so much love for him. Like there's a lot of guys that pass away in
Hmm.
wrestling. Like
Yeah.
people like, feel for him for a year or two, and then it kind of fizzles off because
Hmm.
it's the feel good story and things happen. Brody's
Yeah.
one of those guys that people won't forget. Like even now, it's been 3 years, and people are still
Yes.
like, "Hey, like we're here for you." And
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can see stuff now where like it was his son's birthday, and there's pictures of like all these guys from WWE, and all, like Cody went in and took him to the Disney World, and they went together.
Yeah.
Like that's a bond.
Yeah.
Like Brody or John Huber, he's
Yeah.
one of the kindest souls you'll ever meet, and I mean, when I won my first heavyweight championship, I was considered a joke in Rochester, and people were like, "Oh, this fucking guy." And Brody, on his way out to WWE, I remember I worked him once in Pier Six Wrestling, and he put me over, and no problems about it. Put me over, and graciously put me over and walked out. No complaints. Like, yeah, sure, whatever you gotta do. And we did it. And I remember one of his last shows in New York before he went up to WWE for developmental. We finished a show and he got done. And he was one of like 5 people after the show that was taking the ring down. All these guys that think they're really cool that have been around for 6 months, been around for a cup
Yeah.
of coffee. And this is like he was doing ring teardown, like after he did his whole Claudio thing and Ring of Honor, and like or
Mhm.
Chikara when he did all the Claudio stuff, all the Ring of Honor stuff, when he got signed, he was still waiting till after the show and tearing down board by board the ring while everybody else left. And I
It's so
remember
awesome.
I have a picture of it. It was me and him carrying out boards together. Is one of his last shows in Rochester, and it's just I don't know. He's just a class act. He was a great human being, and just like they always say too, is he was a great wrestler, but he's a great person. Like he was a
Mhm.
great husband. He was a great father. He was a great friend. I mean, there was nothing negative about that man. And I miss him dearly to this day. I know that we weren't the closest of friends, but I know that like person wise, he was one of the most genuine human beings that would do anything. And at a time when he didn't owe me a goddamn thing, he put me over
Wow.
in multiple places just to make me look good because he knew he could help me.
And I think stuff like that is why even the show that they did at Daly's Place a week or two ago, there's really no date calendar connection to his birthday, his passing, his debut, but they designed that whole show and Rampage around Brody, as a tribute, just because of stuff like that.
Oh, he will. I hope that he never gets to a point where they just kind of fizzles out. I hope that they have
Yeah.
something like that for him every year because
Mhm.
and the thing is, you're going to see his son getting involved, and his son's going to be a freaking megastar.
Yeah.
Calling it now, like Brody will be a star
Yep.
if he's anything even remotely close to his father. And
Mhm.
yeah,
Yep. And he'll have and so many people loved Brody or John, Luke, whatever name you want to refer to him by. He'll that kid will have so many people behind him supporting him, thing. It's going to be really cool. And I don't think we're that many years away from where he'll be able to start doing some stuff now. You know.
mm-hmm.
Um, I wanted to ask, like 21 years. Obviously, has there been any time where you fell out of love with wrestling? And if you did, how did you fall back in love with it? And what makes you keep loving the sport?
Oh, can I pause real quick? Can we pause?
Yeah,
All right, hold on 1 second.
you're good.
Sorry about that.
You're good, man. No
Um,
worries.
question one more time. Falling out of love with wrestling?
Yeah, has there ever been a time where you fell out of love with wrestling? How did you fall back in love with it? What makes you continue to love the sport and continue to do it after all these years? Because I feel like it's a sport where like sometimes it will make you the most miserable you've ever been, but also the happiest you've ever been at the same time.
I mean, I've fallen in and out of love with it forever. It's one of those things where with doing it as a job, you love it for different reasons. I mean, I'll be very honest. I still watch tape, but I don't watch it as much as I used to, and I don't follow the storylines like I should. And I'm not I'm not into it like that, where it's like I follow it for every little thing. I watch pay per views. If it's something in the background, I'll watch it, but I'm not sitting here for hours and hours and hours a week watching like I used to. I think it's one of those things where um, I don't know. It's kind of like sports. Like you follow your favorite team, but most people will follow their favorite team, but they don't really care about the rest of the league sometimes.
Yeah,
Like with football, Colts fans might watch the Colts games, but they're not going to go watch 7 games on a Sunday. They'll watch their game and they'll move on
yeah,
with their life.
yeah.
I think it's kind of like that with wrestling, but I think for me is that the reason why I haven't stopped falling out of love with it is that when I first started, I wanted to learn it for myself. And then when I started realizing that I could help teach people and make a difference in their lives with their careers, and even now it's like I watch it because I like watching people get it and I like watching them progress and grow. So it's evolved from a personal selfish thing to how many people can I touch and help change and make the product better. And even if I never see them on TV, like I'll be honest. I don't like watch. Like I said, I don't watch. I watched Raw this week for the first time in months, and it's just there's a fatigue to it. There's only so much you can watch. It's like
Mhm.
anything. So I have to limit myself, but I also know that when I want to watch it, it's because I want to. Like I'll watch the Royal Rumble, but I
Yep.
probably won't watch Raw and SmackDown for the next couple months, and then I'll watch WrestleMania.
Right. Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
it's just there's I don't know. I'm always in love and out of love with it all the time. It never like I never fully fall out of love with it, but I never fully fall in love with it anymore. It's just kind of a constant.
You you feel like part of that's because you're around it in person so often and so much that you need to have that sometimes have that space and not have it consume every area of your life
Oh,
sometimes.
100%. Because it's one of those things where it doesn't have its same wow factor as it did when I was a kid
Yeah,
or when I was really getting into it when I first started, which is fine. It's a different wow factor, but I've also learned that I need to be more well rounded as a person, and wrestling just can't be all there is.
right.
So I limit myself personally to it, where when I'm around it, I immerse myself. You see me at the WCWO shows. I am either watching from production, or I'm giving feedback, or I'm watching from the crowd, or I'm doing whatever I can to help the product. But when I'm away from it, I don't really focus on it too much because I figure with the shows on the weekends, practice a couple days during the week, that's more than enough. 10, 15, 20 hours a week
Hmm.
of doing this stuff is great. And then when friends want to get together and watch tape, then I'll watch tape with them and break that down. But that's as far as it goes for me. I set a limit for myself, so I'm not just obsessed on it because there's more to life than just wrestling. And sometimes people
Hmm.
they
Yeah,
focus on it too much.
yeah. I know I said I wasn't going to bring up anything personal, but I've been
You're
following
good.
you on Facebook and social media. Are you about to become a father?
I am March.
Is this going to be your first kid?
Yep.
How's it feel?
It's weird because I never thought I would have a kid. I always wanted to have a kid. Never thought I was going to have one because honestly, I let wrestling consume my life so much that it ruined a lot of the relationships. And then by the time that I was, you know, winding down into the in-ring stuff, I was like, "Oh, I'm a little too old for this. I don't want to bring a kid into the world when I'm this old because it's not fair to the kid." And then, you
Right.
know, the universe is like, "No, you're having a kid." And I was like, "All right, we're doing this." So I'm super excited about it. I want to help raise and having a son, which is awesome. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna raise him, and it's one of those things where the one thing I will not do though, because people are like, "Oh, you give him wrestling?" No, I'm not gonna push him towards it. It's a
Yeah.
pretty scummy world at times, and it's very difficult for the amount of payoff it is. You really have to love
Yep.
it. So for me, it's one of those situations of if he wants to get involved in it, then I will do everything I can to push him in the right direction. But I'm not going to sit there and be like, "You need to be a wrestler because I was." That's
Right.
nope.
What what are what are some of the things they're most excited about becoming a father? And do you have any fears about becoming a parent?
Oh, tons of fears. I don't want to. I'm not going to go too far into it, but I don't want
Right.
to repeat parents' mistakes. I always want to be
Yeah.
better than what they are, and they know that. I've told that to them to their face many a times. But
Hmm.
because they've done a fantastic job, but there was things that I wish I could have changed and things that I want to do differently. But I think what I'm most scared about is just feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, and I want to be able to give him the best. But I know that I am one. I've always been good with kids. Two, I'm very attentive, and it gives me a purpose. And it's like I wanted to be able to pass down the knowledge and the growth and everything that I have struggled through in my life, living a very unique life compared to most with being on the road with wrestling and just other life experiences. I want to be able to pass along the wisdom and knowledge to help mold another human being to be the best they can be. And knowing that I can pass down my mistakes and my hardships to help make somebody else's life a little easier is wonderful. And I do that. I try to do that a lot with everybody I come in contact with, but to do it for my own son and give
Hmm.
him the best shot available by learning through my mistakes and my fuck ups is the ultimate reward for me.
Yeah. I've got two girls and a boy, and let me tell you, they're very different. And having a boy is terrifying at times, but it is so much fun. Man, that's going to be fun.
I'm super
Um,
excited.
Do you remember your first match? What it was like
First wrestling match that I had, or first wrestling match that I watched?
that you had?
Uh oh yeah, I can remember it. It was in RCW. It was 2003. It was in the back of the Samurai Martial Arts Dojo. I had the worst gear ever. I was Mark Krieger at the time because Krieger just means
Okay.
warrior in German. And I
Okay.
was thought I was like, I don't need people knowing my last name. I don't want people to stalk me and whatnot. So like I thought I was gonna be some fucking superstar. So I had a different last name. I came out in black judo pants because I couldn't afford anything, and I had black kick pads that I went out and bought crushed green velvet, and I sewed it on the top, and I had forearm pads. It was hand pads and forearm pads with the crushed green velvet. I looked like a really shitty Ninja Turtle. And I came out and had a Royal Rumble, and
Right.
they had it in the back of the martial arts outside. And I remember I came out, hit a couple punches, couple of kicks. Someone threw me out, and because I loved bumping and selling, I took a really huge bump that most people wouldn't take. I literally took like a big front flip over the top rope and landed on the fucking cement with like an inch of padding, and just took a straight foot back bump to the outside and got up because I was 17. I was bouncy. I didn't care, but I
Yeah,
freaking
you
took it, and the
youngsters.
crowd went, and that was it. That set the tone. It's like, holy shit, this dude's gonna die. So like they started booking me, and I just kept getting my ass handed to me by everybody. But that's what I was good at.
What are some of the most important things when it comes to marketing yourself as a wrestler that separates the good wrestlers from the great wrestlers, the bad wrestlers from the good wrestlers?
It's not really how you. It's not the presentation. So you got to look at it from this perspective. This is the first thing I tell people because they get it wrong. Everybody goes out and they try to cut a promo and they try to sell themselves. It's not about selling yourselves. You're a promoter, right, Reggie? So let's just say you're a promoter. If I turn around and I say, "Hey, I'm Mark Hauss and I've been around 20 years and I've wrestled all these places and you should book me." What's your first question?
What can you show me that you've actually done?
Yep. And the other thing too is like the biggest thing is that promoters love wrestling, but ultimately, what are they trying to accomplish by running shows? What are you
We're
trying to accomplish?
looking we're looking for somebody that can draw, somebody that can put fans in the seats,
So that you can
that
make
money.
it
Yep.
doesn't matter about the wrestlers. It doesn't matter what wrestlers you get. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
about what they do for a promotion, what they do in general. What they want is the promoters want money. They want to get money, make money by doing something they love.
Yep.
So instead of you going to a promoter and saying, "Hey, I'm this guy. Do you want to book me?" You got to flip the script and you got to say, "Hey, this is how I can make you money." And people don't think like that. So I come into it by going, "Here's my resume. I've trained at these places. Now that you know that I've trained these places, I've worked these companies, these are companies that make money. Here's a heel promo, a face promo. Here's a heel match. Here's a face match. Here's my entrance music. Here's my entrance music. I put it in a Google Drive so that I could copy and paste with 8x10s, headshots, body shots, action shots. So I could just copy paste it, send it to a promoter. Here, you look through it. You want stuff for posters? Look through it. I did it with you. There you go.
Mhm.
Look through whatever you need."
Yep.
So that's the first thing is creating a package that makes sense. Then being able to turn around and take that information and show them why you should work for them. Whether it's seminars, coming in and helping with ring crew, like me. You never see me just sitting around shooting the shit. You never see me wasting
Mhm.
time. I am trying to be as efficient as possible by being around either production, talking to people, asking for
Mhm.
input, whatever I can do. And that's the thing is that you go to these shows, you do ring crew, you go to production, you ask how you can help with hard cams and whatnot. You learn every aspect of it because people think it's just like bitch work. It's not. I can sit there and learn camera, and now because of it, you can watch. I if I go around and I have a match, you'll constantly see me work the cameras. I
Yep.
work like TV. I go right over to the hard cam, and I'll grab right to the hard cam, where I'll look in, or the hard cam, where I'll go to the roaming cam, and I'll go there too. But like you got to be able to figure out all the tricks of the trade and all those little things that's going to be able to get people invested to make the promoter money. So the marketing portion of it, going back around full circle, create a marketing package, put it on a Google Drive, use that to hand out to promoters. You have to go in sometimes, and what I do is kind of like I think of it like a really bad drug deal. Sometimes the first bump is free, and then you give it to them. Like you have to come in sometimes and give the first one for free. show your worth, show them why you're worth money, bet on yourself, and then come back in and be like, now you pay me. Or
Right.
I'll do a seminar, or I'll come in and do a practice match and I'll show you what I got. But you have to go in with the confidence, you have to go in with a game plan, and you have to go in knowing exactly what you are. That's the other thing too, is characters. People don't realize what the characters are. Best thing I tell people is that, like, how old are you, Reggie?
36.
You've been Reggie for 36 years. So somebody comes in, they'll be like, and you'll come in and be like, well, I want to be the trash man. You're like, have you ever been a trash man? No. How long you been Reggie? 36 years. Maybe you should just be Reggie.
Mhm.
And people don't
Yeah.
get that. And then they go, oh, now I get it. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Which is why with my stuff at WCW on camera, I'm me.
Yeah. And you see the
I'm me.
promos sometimes I cut in class and you see all that stuff. It's no
Mhm.
different than what you've seen on a Friday night when I'm hanging out backstage, is it?
Nope.
Nothing.
Nope.
Just me.
Just with a little bit of stuff turned up a little bit and,
That's it.
with a little bit of stuff sprinkled in.
That's it.
That I've seen you after practice at training schools, stick around after the training is actually done and working with some of the younger wrestlers and even some of the older wrestlers in the ring on moves, spots, psychology. Like one trainee I saw you work with, you're like, you're the heel. Why would you not go straight after what you know is injured? I mean, stuff like that, I feel like is lost. And when you were talking earlier about how you watch a lot of wrestling now and it looks so clean and everything, I feel like that is because they're literally rehearsing the entire match ahead of time, just going out and doing a match script. But when that happens, you forget that the crowd is there. And that's one thing that one veteran mentioned is a lot of wrestlers now forget that the crowd is physically there. Is that something that you've seen a lot of as well?
Oh yeah, the thing is that people are so engrossed in getting the moves over, thinking that the moves are going to get the reaction, which they do for a split second, depending on what you do. But like you think about it now, Canadian Destroyer, fantastic move, absolutely amazing move, but it's done so much now, just like a super kick, that people are like, "Yeah, it's fucking Canadian Destroyer," and you're like, "Yep, yep." I
Mhm.
mean, I'll tell you an example. Dr. Tom. I went to a Dr. Tom seminar back in the day, and he's like, watching wrestling nowadays, he was like, it's like watching two elephants fuck. And I was like, interesting. Explain this to me. He goes, you walk in the building after day one, you go, look, there's two elephants fucking outside. And he goes, oh my God, two elephants fucking. After the second day, you're like, yeah, there's two elephants fucking. You're like, yeah, that's pretty cool. After 10 days of seeing the same elephants fucking, you're like, yeah, there's two elephants fucking outside. And you go, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the same thing. Like, there's only so
True.
much you can do. I mean, at certain points, it's like, what are you going to do in these feuds? You're going to pull a gun on each other? Like,
Mhm.
so it's for me, with the psychology of it, is I look at it two ways. Wrestling is like a puzzle. We have perfected the art of putting the puzzle together in terms of moves, how we do everything. So people try to reinvent the wheel all the time with moves and whatnot. That's great, but really, ultimately, it's a puzzle that's been put together, taken apart, put together, taken apart millions and millions of times by people that are way better than us that have come before us. So
Mhm.
trust that. The other portion of it where people are lacking is that everybody has a fantastic fucking book of their career. The problem is all the pages are loose and nobody's got glue or tape to work with. And the guys that make it are the ones that figured out how to make glue or how to get tape to be able to put their story together in the right pieces. The people that don't make it don't know how to do it, so they're still scrambling trying to put the pieces together. Because really, the like I said, the wrestling is solid, and the wrestling is what's written on the piece of paper. The things in between, the cells, the transitions, being able to keep people invested in between is the part that is the glue, the tape, whatever you got to do to put that book together. And people aren't putting it together because they don't know how. And that's where we're lacking, is that there's not enough glue and tape in the business to be able to put these stories together. Because if you think about it, you go to an indie show. To be very honest with you, you watch 7, 8 shows, right? 7, 8 matches. Out of those, there's maybe one that's got the story loosely together. And if you're lucky, you'll get one that's really, really good. But for the most part, it's just pages and you're picking up page 20, then page 70, then page 200. And you're like, yeah, the story, I mean, this page looks good, but does it make sense? No. Because you get guys that like Heat. Heat's a huge one. In this area alone, I've seen a lot of it, and that's just me personally, and I can get a lot of poo poo for it. But you watch guys cheat over and over and over again in front of the ref.
Or ref bumps.
Yeah. And what happens? It doesn't make the bad guy, it doesn't make the heel look good. It
Mhm.
makes the referee look shitty. And then on top of that, it's like, what made Ric Flair a great heel? He could out wrestle anybody, but he still cheated. But he did it in a way where no one saw him. If Ric Flair just
Exactly.
sat there and cheated for 10 minutes in front of the referee, no
Yeah,
one would care about Ric Flair the way they do today. But the fact that he
exactly.
did cheat when he didn't have to, oh, not outside of the ref, and then every once in a while he would get caught when he clearly could out wrestle them.
Yep.
Because again,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask this question with you. I want to see your answer to this. I think I've said this to you, but I might not have. What makes a heel a heel?
Man. See, to me, what makes a heel is a you're just a bad guy, somebody that does a wrestler that does or says bad things that you know are not they're wrong. Whether it be cheating, being a dick, just belittling. You're just there's so many different ways to be a heel, but
But if
there's a
you've never
clear
seen a
cut
match
difference
before,
between them. Yes.
if you see just me and you wrestle, right?
Mhm.
And you've never watched us before, and we come out to the
Mhm.
ring, why is the heel the heel? Not what makes them, but why is the heel the heel?
The heel is the heel because
People don't think about this.
they don't.
Well,
They
think about it
don't.
this way. So when you wake up, let's say we go to WCWO and it's you versus me, and you're supposed to be the
Mhm.
bad guy. Do you
Yeah.
wake up in the morning saying, I'm going to be an asshole to everybody and I hate the world?
Not every day, but some days.
But
But
in general, you
not
want to be the
typically.
hero. You want to be the hero of your own story, right?
Yeah.
So what makes a heel is, and this is a little bit peeling back the curtain a little bit, but what makes a heel is the fact that they physically cannot out wrestle the face. So they have to at least cut the corners once to gain
Hmm.
the advantage because they don't have the ability to get over on the other person. So I'm the face because I can clearly out wrestle you, and you have to cut corners. The second that you cut a corner is the second that you're a bad guy. And the thing is, the difference between a heel heat and a face shine, if you're not cheating, is nothing. Is that one instance where you cut the corner? That's it. And also, too, it depends on where you're at. Like, I could come to WCWO and shit all over Indianapolis because I'm from New York. And now I'm a heel.
Yep.
But I could come in and say I'm from New York and cheer Indianapolis, and I could be a babyface. But it really ultimately breaks down to the best heels are the ones that believe with full conviction of what they're selling, and the crowd doesn't eat it up. That's why you saw the whole stuff with Sean and Brett when they were in Canada. Brett was the face. When they were in the States, Brett was the heel. There was nothing different between the two of them in that feud. The only difference was they were in different countries
Yeah.
believing the same stuff, and they were facing heels.
Yeah.
But really, ultimately, what it breaks down to is the heel has to cut a corner somewhere to
Yeah.
gain an advantage, and that's it. And people make it so much harder than that, and that's where I think a lot of the glue doesn't come in because like I need to be cheating and I need to be screaming yelling. No, you don't. You just need to be. You need to show that you're shittier of a wrestler and you don't have as much in the tank as that other person. That's it.
I told one wrestler backstage one week, you're not allowed to. He was a heel. I said, you're not allowed to bump the ref. You're not allowed to cheat. He's like, well, why? I'm like, get creative. Do something because you've cheated or bumped the ref every week for the last month and a half, and you find another way.
It
You
shows
know.
that you don't know how to wrestle. You're taking the
Mhm.
cheap way out because
Mhm.
you clearly aren't creative enough or skilled enough to be
Mhm.
able to prove that you are
Mhm.
a good wrestler.
Yeah. Work the crowd. Be a heel to the crowd or something to get them to not want you to like be creative as a heel. But to piggyback of what you were talking about, kind of, is there a difference between telling a story overall in a storyline and telling a story within a match? And how is that kind of a lost art now, do you think?
Yes and no. I mean, super indies and main event stuff, yes, it is. It's still there because people still watch because the stories are still there and we talk about them. The indie level, it's always going to be that way. There's because it's the learning ground. It's just a matter of I think a lot of the schools, like I'll give a shout out to Rochester, so the school that um, Flower City Wrestling Academy, FCWA. So if anybody goes to Rochester, they can hit me up, or and we can give you all the details. They have drop in rates all the time, but It's run by a guy named Maddock. It's supported by Colin Delaney, Nick Ando,
Oh,
Cheech and Cloudy from
nice.
Up in Smoke, and Chris Worthless. So the six of them collectively work together. But they teach all that stuff. They teach not only the moves, but sequences. And the biggest thing is that they teach the why. Nobody teaches the why anymore of why you do things. Just like do a move. And I think that um, with stories, you got to be able to, one, you have to really know your crowd. Two, you have to be able to understand what they're looking for because you can go out there and sell a super indie match when all they want to see is punch, kicks, and comedy. But you have to know that crowd, which is why, like, when I have matches, I sit in the back and I have a whole idea of what I'd like to do, but I watch everything up to my match. And if anything overlaps, I scrap it and go to something else. Where guys don't
Yeah.
do that. They just sit in the
Yeah.
back, they have their thing planned, and then you end up seeing 7 matches straight with strong style comebacks and no sell falsies. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay. And then no one does a comedy spot. And then I'll be like, oh, well, I was going to do strong style, but no one's on a comedy spot. So I'm going to go do a comedy spot. And then boom, I'm now unique and people react. And now people don't forget me because I've done
Mhm.
something different. Storylines. And the other thing, too, is that people are not vulnerable anymore. People are so afraid. And I say this all the time to students. I think you've heard me say it is in storylines, you have to be able to, I mean, in general, you have to, but in storylines, to make them evolve, you have to be able to, as a heel, show your ass. And the
Mhm.
reason I say that is like you watch Ric Flair. What did Ric Flair do? He got in the ring for his matches against a local nobody. He'd get in the ring. He would let them face shine. He'd cut them off. He'd get a little bit of heat. They'd get a little bit of a comeback. Sunset flip, pull the trunks down, literally showing his ass. He would be the baddest man on the planet in the NWA. And then he would show his ass. He would be vulnerable for a second. Everybody would be like, oh, yeah, he is human. And then what do you do? He would turn it up to 50 and beat the holy hell out of you.
Mhm.
A lot of heels are too afraid because they need to look strong that they don't want to be vulnerable. Where when I'm a heel, I will embarrass myself to no end because I want to be able to make that baby face look good ultimately, because that's the whole point. To get people to come back and buy tickets, it's a matter of if the heel is over, the heel's got to look so dastardly and so strong that no one thinks they have a chink in the armor. So you want to see how the baby face can finally foil them.
Mhm.
And then eventually with the payoff, you expose that chink in the armor and you let them have it.
Yep. And just along with what you said, I feel like a lot of baby faces are also afraid to look vulnerable as
Oh my
well.
god.
Like, Hulk Hogan, John Cena, like
They got their ass kicked all the
the
time.
whole time. And then at the end of the match, randomly Hulk up or Super Cena up, and boom, the five moves and the leg drop, and the
Well,
like,
think about it this
yeah,
way: who's your favorite football team?
Packers,
Okay, and who's your least favorite team?
the Bears.
Cowboys, Bears. Okay, so let's just say Bears. Bears. Everybody's least favorite team is the Cowboys.
It is.
Even the Cowboys
The-
fans, their least favorite is
yeah,
the Cowboys.
the Bears, the Bears are the Vikings,
Okay,
probably.
so let's
Yeah.
just do this: Bears versus Packers in Lambeau Field. Would you rather watch a game that goes back and forth 7-7, 14-14, 21-21? You're down by 3, and there's, I don't know, or you're down by 2, and there's
Mhm.
30 seconds left, and you're able to kick a field goal and win by 1, but it's been back and forth all game. Is
Mhm.
that fun? Or would you rather have it be, let's say the Bears come out to a 28-0 first quarter rout and they just start beating the crap out of you, and you're like, it's over. And then all of a sudden, by halftime, it's like 35-0. And then third quarter, it's 35-7, 35-14,
Mhm.
35-21. Holy crap. Holy crap. Holy crap. And then you guys finally win by 3 points because they kicked that last minute or that
Yeah.
last second field goal. Would you rather see the comeback, or would you rather see the even back and forth and then win by 1?
Oh, I'd rather watch the comeback because the back and forth, it's fun. You're hooked, but it's like my heart can't handle that anymore. So I'd rather watch because everybody loves a good comeback. Everybody likes a comeback story,
So
you know?
take that and
Yeah.
turn it into wrestling. Would you rather see a back and forth wrestling match where one guy just hits a finisher and calls it a day after a reversal, or would you rather see a guy get beat down to the point where he barely can stand, makes the comeback, and miraculously pulls it out?
Yeah.
I want to see the comeback. That's the whole point. And the thing is that the
Mhm.
baby faces don't sell enough to allow themselves anymore to be so beat up and so damaged. Like, I mean, the closest you got recently is like honestly the Sammy Roman thing. Sammy is a fantastic seller, and he made it
Yeah.
to the point where you felt emotion for him.
Hmm.
And then when he starts making his comeback, even if he doesn't win, that comeback is holy shit. Like, not for wrestling purposes, but just as a human being, like, I feel for this guy, and like, hell yeah, this dude is
Hmm.
crushing it. That's kind of
Yeah.
what I meant.
Ilya Dragunov is one of my favorite champions because he legitimately, like, he sells well, he gets his ass kicked the dude is being tortured and in pain, but finds a way back to win. And then the MJF Samoa Joe match that they had, or maybe it was the one of the matches where MJF was looked like he was injured the whole time and somehow found a way to win
Yep.
that match in the end. Going in, you're like, he's not going to win this match. There's
Nope.
no way he can win this. He won the match, and just kept
And
fighting.
that's
Those
what
are the
wrestling is.
Yep. Those are the best ones. Who are some of your favorites? Do you have favorite opponents, favorite dance partners that you've had over the years? And if you do, what makes those stand out?
I don't. I mean, I have people that I enjoy working. Like, I worked Maximo Suave for a bunch of times, and we always tore it up. And I just had fun working with him because it was easy. We were able to have nothing but trust. I mean, I tagged with Mike Law for a little while, and him and I had a lot of fun just tagging together. Um, I don't really. The problem is I don't have a ton of favorite dance partners because a lot of people I didn't work two, three, four times. I didn't have lots of long-standing feuds. My thing was is that for a lot of the companies I was in, I was leaders of factions. People would put me as a
Oh,
leader
okay.
because I could talk. And so I'd work a lot of random guys to go against the faction.
Okay.
But I didn't have a ton of like feuds. Oh, so Maximo and then the other one, the only other real big feud I have was Alex Payne.
Okay.
So him and I worked. It was funny. We were Excite Wrestling, and I didn't have a direction. He didn't have a direction, and I begged the promoter. I said, "Give us 6 matches." And I was like, I don't want it for titles. I don't want it for anything. And we had 6 matches to the point where we were the mid card. We were like low mid card at the time, to the point where people tuned in to watch that over the heavyweight championship because it got so good. I mean, it got to a point where it was like just a couple of the spots that people loved is that we ended up doing. I at the time I had 4 managers, so I had a life coach, I
Okay.
had like a Briscoe and Patterson style stooge. I had
Okay.
my childhood friend, and I had a lawyer. And so we had a match, and they were all on each side, and he had to wrestle with 4 managers, and he ended up pulling out the win. I mean, the 2 big spots we had is at the match. We had a lumberjack match, and I remember we wrestled this match, and it was like brutal, back and forth, beat the crap out of each other. And the big move was that all the lumberjacks got into a circle and started fighting each other, and there's about 20 of them out there, and I got superplexed off the top rope to the outside on top of every
Oh,
single one of the lumberjacks, and the crowd went ballistic, and it was in this like little grungy place. And then our feud ended. We had a falls count anywhere, or no, I quit match, and I remember he tombstoned me off the top rope through a table,
oh,
and that was like the big spot. But what ended up doing it is that we actually had a double turn at the end because I was the heel and he was the baby face, and my manager was getting choked out with a chair, and I was duct taped and on with one arm and tied with a tie to the other arm to the ropes, so I couldn't get out, and I quit because I didn't want my manager, who was my friend, to get hurt. It turned me babyface and it turned him heel immediately, and the crowd went, and we were able to continue on the feud, just flipped.
oh, that's nice.
Yep.
That's awesome. The double turn, I feel like, would be one of the hardest things to really, really pull off
It took us
really well.
8 months to turn it around. But
Yeah.
as soon as he put the chair on the manager, and the manager everybody hated, but as soon as he put the chair on him, and I showed empathy for him, and I quit for him, and I gave up everything that I had hated him for 8 months, the crowd felt that, and basically were begging for him to stop.
That's awesome.
You know,
What does what does 2024 look like for you? We're early on in the year, but obviously getting cleared to compete again, hopefully.
clear to compete,
Becoming a
having my
father.
son, and then just kind of figuring out what's next to see if I one have enough left in the tank to be able to go. Two, if I actually want to do it, depending on my body, and three, it's all I've ever known. So now I have to start figuring out how to accept doing something different in wrestling
Yes.
because I can't keep working.
Right.
I've had too many injuries, and it's one of those things where it's like, I guess being okay and accepting the fact that behind the scenes and helping and teaching, and if I want to be involved in it still, is okay. That's kind of where
Right.
I'm at.
That makes sense. Man, Mark, thanks for doing this today. It's hard to
Of
believe
course.
we went just over an hour. I hope you had as much fun as I did with this, man.
Oh, of course I did. This was awesome.
This has been fun, man. And I just want to say thank you for everything you're doing for the WCW locker room and for the shows and for bringing your
Yeah.
knowledge, man. And that locker room is really lucky to have people like yourself, Michael Elgin, TJ Powers, Joey Owens. The amount of experience and knowledge that there's been over the last year in that locker room, man, it's been a lot of fun to be in there right now.
Well, the good thing is you can call me up anytime you want for any advice or anything you want because I'm a phone call away now, my man.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for doing this today. And
Of course.
I'll see you at a show soon.
Tonight.
Yes.
Well, tonight when we're recording this. I don't know when you're posting this, but tonight.
And yeah, as of the recording tonight, when it posts, it might be a Tuesday, not tonight, but tonight.